The air inside the courtroom pressed down like a weight, thick and almost toxic. Diddy sat rigid at the defense table, fingers locked together so tightly they looked drained of life. Every rustle of paper, every faint groan of the wooden benches behind him rang out like thunder in the stillness. The tension clung to the skin, smothering, inescapable. Somewhere in the back, the sharp click of a camera shattered the silence, louder than it had any right to be. He tried to sit strong, but the twitch of his jaw and the impatient tap of his foot betrayed the storm building beneath the surface. Above him, the judge sat like a statue, her eyes boring into him, dissecting him piece by piece. It wasn't just a stare, it was a slow unraveling. For Diddy, every second stretched into an eternity, dragging him deeper into the fire. Before we peel back the next layer of this courtroom tension, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss what's coming next. Now, let's get back to it. Across the aisle, the prosecutor leaned back with a faint smirk curling on his lips, carrying the kind of confidence that whispered he knew something no one else did. Diddy noticed, his eyes narrowing for just a breath before snapping back to the bench. This was no time for weakness. Yet in the back of his mind, the rumors about this judge wouldn't fade, stories of ruthless sentences that shattered men and dominated headlines. His throat tightened, each swallow jagged, every breath a struggle. From the gallery, a cough rang out, and instantly his shoulders stiffened. The gavel on the bench sat untouched, but it felt like a weapon loaded and waiting to strike. Beside him, his lawyer shifted slightly, fingertips grazing the yellow notepad, but no words came. None were needed. This was beyond arguments now. Every ounce of power hung in the hands of the figure cloaked in black, and Diddy knew that whatever happened next could redefine his life forever. The silence itself was terrifying, more crushing than any words. It scraped across the nerves of everyone present. He adjusted in his seat, pushing his shoulders back as if straighter posture might lighten the crushing weight of his stare. But nothing changed. Nothing ever could. His mind spun out of control, replaying every scandal, every headline, every accusation that had trailed him for months. It felt like millions of unseen eyes hovered in that room, watching, waiting, hungry to see whether he'd walk free or be led away in chains. Even his breath seemed too loud, deliberate, heavy with fear. The defense table became the smallest island in existence, swallowed by a sea of judgment. Behind him, the gallery breathed like a single restless creature, reporters frozen, pens hovering, cameras locked on him, waiting to capture a moment that would be stamped into history forever. A faint shutter clicked again, stealing another piece of his story. Across the room, the prosecutor leaned forward now, fingers tapping a slow rhythm on the stack of files before him, like a drummer counting down to a strike. Diddy caught the movement in the corner of his eye but refused to react. He wouldn't let the man taste his unease. And then it happened, a shift, small but undeniable. The judge's hand crept toward the gavel, slow and deliberate, almost theatrical. She let it hover too long, as if savoring the moment, forcing him to feel the full weight of what was coming. The air thickened. The room seemed to close in. The creak of a chair as she leaned forward echoed like a warning shot no one could ignore. Every instinct in Diddy screamed to move, to speak, to throw words into the silence before the hammer fell. But his lawyer's hand, resting firm against his forearm, was an anchor, a quiet order to wait. Deep down, though, he knew waiting could be the most dangerous choice of all. His jaw locked tight as his eyes tried to search the judge's face for even the faintest flicker of emotion. Nothing. Just that same cold, unreadable mask that had stalked him through every hearing. His hands clamped the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white, as if by holding on hard enough he could stop his life from unraveling. Then the prosecutor's voice tore through the tension like a blade, sharp, deliberate, every word polished with deadly precision. He wasn't simply presenting evidence. He was weaving a narrative, stitching together rumors, scandals, and headlines into a story designed to strip Diddy of redemption. Pages flipped, footsteps paced, movement so intentional it all felt like theater. A murmur spread through the crowd, restless, alive. Some leaned forward, others whispered, all sensing the storm was about to break. Eyes bounced between the judge and Diddy, two figures locked in a silent contest of endurance. When his lawyer finally lifted a hand to speak, the judge silenced him with a single glance, a denial louder than words. The prosecutor circled back toward his table, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper that still carried to the last row. Some men think they can buy their way out of justice, but justice is never for sale. The line struck like a slap, freezing the room in place. Diddy's mind flashed through memories of late-night deals and backroom handshakes, faces of allies who vanished the second the spotlight turned dark. Those weren't just memories, they were weights dragging him under. For the first time in years, he understood this wasn't business. This was survival. The judge leaned forward slowly, her fingers drumming against the bench in a rhythm that seemed louder than any gavel strike. The entire courtroom bent toward her, caught in the gravity of her smallest gestures. Diddy's chest rose and fell in careful, deliberate breaths, eyes locked on her face, desperate for a clue, a sign, anything. But the silence was merciless. Then the scrape of paper echoed as the prosecutor slid another document toward the clerk. Diddy didn't need to read it. The smirk curling at the man's lips told him enough. Each page was another brick added to the wall closing in around him. The gallery sat frozen, bodies stiff, breaths barely audible. Some had come seeking justice, others entertainment, and a few sat with a hungry gleam, desperate to witness history being carved in real time. One man in the back lifted his phone under the guise of scratching his head, angling for a secret shot of Diddy's face. The bailiff moved quick, shutting it down, but the damage was done. The moment etched itself into the room's collective memory. Diddy tugged at his suit jacket, a feeble attempt to restore control. His lawyer leaned close, whispering reassurance he barely heard. All his focus locked on the judge, on the way she picked up a pen, tapped it twice against the pad, then placed it back down without writing a word. That wasn't habit. That was calculation. The weight of years, the scandals, the rumors, the whispered accusations, seemed to crush down on Diddy's shoulders all at once. He had faced impossible negotiations before, signed deals worth millions, maneuvered power plays behind closed doors. But none of that mattered here. This wasn't about contracts or checks. It was about a gavel, and the woman holding it, who could erase everything he built with a single swing. Every word waiting to fall from her lips carried more weight than any lyric, any business move, any empire. And the way her eyes froze on him, sharp and unblinking, made it clear. She knew it too. Her gaze never left him, slicing through every layer he tried to shield, as if she could strip him bare with silence alone. He shifted in his chair, the movement stiff, mechanical, betraying nerves he could no longer hide. His palms clung to the polished wood of the table, slick with sweat, like it was the only thing keeping him grounded in the storm. The courtroom clock ticked methodically, each second echoing louder than the last, carving into the stillness. Yet somehow, time itself felt suspended, like the entire room was caught holding its breath. Then the prosecutor rose, straightening his jacket in a single, smooth motion, pacing with deliberate confidence. His words weren't arguments. They were weapons, each syllable a direct strike meant to dismantle a reputation decades in the making. For every triumph Diddy had paraded in the public eye, the prosecutor countered with a shadow to expose it. The duality was brutal. Murmurs rippled through the gallery, but were silenced instantly by the bailiff's glare. The audience leaned forward, hooked, caught between disbelief and fascination. This was no longer a trial. It was an unmasking. And Diddy's face, despite his effort to hold it neutral, betrayed the cracks forming under pressure. His lawyer slid a note across the table, scrawled with words of strategy, but Diddy barely glanced at it. He knew no piece of paper could lift the weight pressing down on him. This wasn't about legal clauses anymore. This was about legacy, about the story the world would tell once the courtroom doors opened again. The judge rested her chin against her hands, her expression unreadable, but her stillness screamed louder than any verdict. Every tilt of her head, every pause, carried a weight of scales tipping in unseen calculations. Mercy, if there was any, was being measured in silence. Diddy's breaths came shallow now, chest rising and falling like every inhale had to wrestle against 1,000 thoughts clawing for space in his head. The air itself felt charged, heavy, almost poisonous, yet no one dared break it. His eyes darted once more to the clock, every tick an enemy marching him closer to fate. Across the aisle, the prosecutor paused, locked eyes with him, and the look pierced deeper than words. The papers in his hand were no longer documents. They were daggers, and the way he held them said he knew exactly how to strike. He leaned into the mic, lowering his voice so the room strained to catch each word. Power wasn't in volume. It was in precision. Diddy's lawyer tapped the table, a gesture to keep control, though his own hand trembled as he lifted a glass of water. The rim clinked against his teeth before he set it back down untouched. His mind wasn't on thirst. It was on the one question suffocating the room. When would the judge speak? The gallery stayed frozen, reporters' pens poised midday, every breath shallow. Even the scrape of a shoe against the floor rang deafening, because in this moment, nothing mattered more than the silence before the storm. The judge leaned back slowly, her eyes narrowing just enough to show that every detail was being dissected, not just heard. She wasn't simply presiding over a case. She was peeling it open layer by layer, and Diddy felt it with every extra second her gaze lingered on him. Each look seemed to ask the same silent question. Did he even believe his own defense? Beneath the surface, the air carried a charge, building towards something sharp and irreversible. Whatever was coming, it wasn't going to be soft. It was going to be final, the kind of moment that left scars no money or power could erase. Her stare locked on him like a predator stalking its prey. The silence wasn't just quiet, it was suffocating. The reporters had stopped writing, the gallery had frozen mid-breath, and even the air itself seemed unwilling to move. Diddy's shoulders twitched, as though the stillness alone was crushing him. He shifted in his chair, lips parting like he might speak, but no words made it past his throat. Then came the faintest creak of wood as the judge's hand brushed near the gavel, and the sound cracked through the room like thunder. Diddy's eyes darted from the bench to her face, searching desperately for a hint of mercy, of anger, at anything. But she remained stone. And in the pause that followed, you could hear the thud of his heartbeat in the silence. A chair squeaked somewhere behind him, and Diddy flinched at the tiny sound. He swallowed hard, the motion visible even across the room, and for the first time his composure looked like a costume draped over raw desperation. When the judge leaned forward, the groan of the leather chair echoed like a warning bell. The tension recoiled like a bowstring ready to snap. Every camera zoomed in. Every spectator held still. Diddy clenched his fists under the table, nails carving crescents into his palms, but his eyes never blinked. For him, the world outside no longer existed. There was only this room, this robed figure, and the verdict lingering in the silence between them. The judge's lips pressed into a line so thin it looked carved from stone. Slowly, deliberately, she raised the gavel, not to strike, not yet, but to hold it aloft like a weapon heavy with judgment. All eyes locked on that single movement. Diddy's breath shortened to shallow whispers, his knuckles bleaching as he clung to the table. The prosecutor stood a folder forward, the whisper of paper across with carrying more menace than a shout. Diddy's jaw clenched at the sound, his body coiled in dread. Still, the judge's eyes never left him. Not for a second. It was a look of someone who had already decided, and was letting silence deliver its own punishment. A murmur bubbled in the back row before the bailiff's glare cut it off instantly. The clock on the wall ticked on, each second a cruel drumbeat. Diddy's eyes shone, not with the fire defiance he once carried into boardrooms and cameras, but with the raw terror of a man staring into the abyss. The judge leaned forward, the folds of her robe cascading like waves across the bench, and at last she spoke. Not a sentence, not a judgment wrapped in mercy, but words that stripped away the last thread of hope he had been clinging to. Diddy's mouth opened in protest, but nothing came out. He knew, and everyone in the room knew, that no plea could stop what was already in motion. Not with a bang. Not yet. But like a shadow swallowing him whole, the weight closing on Diddy with every passing second. This wasn't just a trial anymore. This was a last inhale before the plunge. The gavel came down, a crack so sharp it echoed through wood, walls, and every chest in that room. The sound wasn't just loud, it was final. Diddy flinched. His shoulders jerked as if he'd been struck. For a split second, he froze, like a man trying to process the end of everything. The judge didn't wait. Leaning back, eyes sharp and unblinking, they spoke words that carved themselves into Diddy's mind like stone. Every syllable landed cold, heavy, impossible to fight. The kind of voice that didn't ask for a response. It demanded silence. Gasps spread through the gallery. A woman in the second row clutched her mouth. A man shook his head in disbelief. Cameras fired nonstop, catching every tremor in Diddy's jaw, every dart of his eyes as his gaze fell toward the floor. The swagger? Gone. The defiance? Gone. That legendary confidence? Completely shattered. He turned toward his lawyer, lips parting to speak. But his attorney didn't even look at him. That silence said everything. The bailiff stepped forward, polished shoes clicking against the courtroom floor. Every step echoed like a countdown. When his hand landed on Diddy's shoulder, the moment hit. Diddy's breath caught. Slowly, almost unwillingly, he rose. His wrists extended, unresisting. Then came the metallic click, the handcuff snapping shut, louder than the gavel itself. Diddy looked over his shoulder one last time, maybe searching for a familiar face, maybe trying to burn this moment into memory before it dissolved into the chaos ahead. The judge's final words still lingered, invisible but suffocating, following him as he was led toward the side door. No music, no applause, no Hollywood ending. Just a heavy creak of the door shutting behind him, sealing the chapter. And even as the courtroom emptied, the air stayed heavy. The echo of that verdict, the chill of that sentence, the reminder that this day would mark him forever.